Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 10 of our reading of Alfred Hitchcock Presents Stories Not for the Nervous, and we are still reading The Dog Died First by Bruno Fischer. I think we'll probably finish that one up very shortly, and then we will start the next story. Anyways, we're going to go over the copyright information, which should be on the screen right now. It clearly says the author gratefully acknowledges the invaluable assistance of Robert Arthur in the preparation of this volume. This has all the publication history, all of the different publishing companies and stuff like that, all the poignant information. So make sure you check that out. Now, also, there will be the acknowledgments on screen. I will not be reading those, but they will be on the screen for you to read if you want to read them. Anyways, there we go. Anyways, in the last story, they deduced who the killer was, but that the killer was right outside the door, so we don't know what's going to happen now. The disgrace, Marie blubbered. The scandal. And then I saw the gun. Outside the window, George Cannon held it in his skinny hand against his hip. Rays from the sinking sun glinted on the barrel. Breath clogged my throat. There was no chance in flight, only in more words, and in not telling it, and not letting him realize that I knew he was there. So that's why you protected him, I said. Though he murdered the man you loved, you knew that George had killed him. Having seen Emmett alive and outside the home at 10, there was no way possible. Yet you were ready to see Dot die for George's crimes. Her shoulders heaved. George said he could get her off. And there would have been a frightful scandal if George had gone on trial. Everyone would have known that Emmett had been her voice was completely to pieces. I looked at Marie as I spoke, and actually my words were directed at the man outside with the gun. The police know the truth, I said. When they found the dog's body, the pieces fell into place. With your evidence, there will be no doubt of his guilt. The police are on their way now to... Outside, someone yelled. The man at the window jerked around, and all of George Cannon's slight body became visible. He held the muzzle of the gun against his temple. The sound of the shot wasn't very loud. Then he crumpled out of sight below the window sill, and I saw Ricardo running up the porch steps. I dashed out to the porch. Ricardo was looking down at the dead man. Shot himself when he saw me, Ricardo said. Guess he thought I was coming to arrest him. Yes, I muttered. I made him think so. He raised angry black eyes at me. Why didn't you wait for me? Doesn't matter now, I said, turning away from George Cannon's body. Inside the house, Marie was sobbing brokenly. I guess not, Ricardo said softly. He went into the house. I walked as far as the porch steps so that I would not be too near the dead man. In a little while, I thought, I would be bringing Dot home, and I would buy Larry Robbins another dog. Okay. Next we have The 20 Friends of William Shaw by Raymond E. Banks. Okay, let's go. The 20 Friends of William Shaw. It isn't often that a butler calls at my house, even less often that he is carrying a lunch basket. But I admitted Higgins because he worked for William Shaw, and William Shaw once, he had done me a great favor. Higgins was affably formal, and conveyed his employer's respects. I brought out a bottle of my best wine, still remembering my indebtedness because William Shaw was an old and true friend. Bring me up to date, I said. I haven't seen Mr. Shaw for a long time. Well, since his marriage, said Higgins quietly. I had always admired Higgins' firm jaw and precise manner of speech. He was the kind of butler who could competently direct the affairs of the moment by just the right kind of smile or frown. Now his face was absolutely set in stone. A man committed to a purpose since his marriage, he repeated. Grace Shaw was rather, after the marriage, her presence put a kind of damper on the old crowd, I said. Mr. Shaw had very few weaknesses, said Higgins. His wife was one of them. An older man, a younger woman. His later years have been difficult. Higgins moved his lunch basket delicately with the pointed toe of his conservative black shoe. Because of Mr. Shaw's desire to help people, he found himself in a bad position, said Higgins. There is little left of what he once. Oh. There is little left of what was once a large estate. Divorce was out of the question, since Mrs. Shaw would certainly have settled for no less than most of it. I recalled the last time I'd been to the Shaws. The stunning sparkle of the necklace Grace Shaw had worn, and the way she had caressed it against her white throat. Most certainly out of the question, I said, unconsciously imitating the little Higgins' extremely precise English. It was hard not to imitate that dryly forceful voice. Deserting one's wife and going into hiding leaves much to be desired, Higgins went on. Principally, it cuts a man off from his friends, and Mr. Shaw always lived for his friends. We had some great times, I said, before. Furthermore, accidents are hard to explain, Higgins went on. I found myself staring now at the basket with a growing interest and distaste. I shuddered, but it must have been the wine. It sparkled blood red in Higgins' pale fingers as he lifted the glass to the sunlight. My picture window was open, and a strong earth smell, a smell of spring and flowers, lingered in the room, a time of hope and reawakening. You have a fine home here, said Higgins, looking around. You've done well, Mr. Shaw. You've done well. Mr. Shaw will be delighted to know that you have done so well. I was once at the point of killing myself, I said. There was something about him that invited confidence. I was a pretty dismal failure. I was broke, without friends or family, and I was also seriously ill, and I didn't even have enough money to buy drugs to ease my pain. I went up to the Hollywood Hills, to the big sign up there that spells the HOLLYWOOD across the face of the hills. People used to jump off the sign, you know. But then you met Mr. Shaw, Higgins said, smiling a little. Turning point, I said. He was a stranger. He owed me nothing, but he spent a great deal of time and money in getting me back on my feet. I shall never forget it. Of course you shan't, said Higgins. Mr. Shaw has at least 20 friends like you, people who were in desperate circumstances, and then he found them. Higgins edged the basket further from himself and closer to me. His smile increased in warmth and understanding. I always hoped I could repay him in some way, I said. Mr. Shaw never expects repayment when he helps people, says Higgins. Still, there is a little matter of which you might be able to help him. Well, if there's anything, I let the words hang because the smile was no longer in evidence. He looked suddenly almost forbidding. Unfortunately, the man who has been always the soul of kindness may well die at the hands of the state, said Higgins, his eyes clouded. However, it is probable that Grace Shaw's disappearance will cause no great comment. She has disappeared before, once with a sailor for a 2-week affair in San Diego. Another time, I believe, was a truck driver. I had heard she had her faults, I said. Higgins' perfectly tailored shoulders shrugged. This time, who knows? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker? She's gone, and Mr. Shaw looks and acts 20 years younger, as if a great weight has been lifted from his shoulders. Of course, there is her pesky brother trying to make trouble, but Mr. Shaw won't have him around now that Grace has gone. He finished his wine and rose. Mr. Shaw Shaw's best and closest friends are all helping him. Perhaps 20 or so, the ones who owed him the most. I trust we can count on you. But Higgins bowed and moved to the door. I wouldn't delay if I were you, he said. The weather is warm and the dry ice won't last long. Good day, Mr. Benson, but not goodbye. Mr. Shaw will soon have one of his old-time get-togethers, a sort of celebration, and you and your wife are most cordially invited. I walked him to the door. I accompanied him across the small porch, down the walk, and to the door of the Rolls. Wow, Rolls Royce? I haven't had much experience in these matters, I protested. Mr. Goodlace went fishing on a deep-sea boat, said Higgins. Mr. Al Drayton was putting in a brick patio. Eileen Wilson found her garden needed new rose bushes, the deep-rooted kind. One's mind can conceive of many possibilities. Higgins grasped my hand and smiled. Take care of yourself, Mr. Benson. You look pale. I suggest you lie down and rest for a few moments. Mr. Shaw always considered you one of his staunchest. The Rolls was gone. I have never been one to do much work in the yard, but the family was away, and it was a sunny afternoon, so I went out into the garden with the shovel, leaving the basket in the garage. The first patch of ground resisted any considerable digging, but I found another spot soft by a patch of hyacinths. Soon I became aware of another presence at my side. What are you doing? Said a small child, a boy. He was watching me with serious eyes. I thought of a possible range of replies, but settled for the simple one. Digging, I said. Digging what? The neighbor's child asked. It was Danny, the curious one, already launched on a lifetime of gossip. A hole, I said, beginning to sweat even though I was barely more than 6 inches deep. This went on until he learned I was planting a rose bush. My mom doesn't plant rose bushes that deep, he said, hard and suspicious. Normally, he had an attractive young face full of intelligence. Today, his eyes looked close set and his mouth sneering. You may be right, I said, abandoning the project. With 35 children loose in the neighborhood, it didn't seem precisely the right time to proceed. There wasn't much time left, as my wife would be back at 5 and my son Timmy at 6. Many persons do not know the virtues of the modern-day city dump. The old-fashioned dump was, with its shacks and its islands of rubble, some burning, surrounded by railroad tracks, and inhabited by derelicts, is a thing of the past. The dump near my house is run by the JHK Construction Company. It is a tract of low land that is being slowly filled and will eventually become the construction site for a long row of $40,000 homes. It is surrounded by a high wire fence and has a polite attendant who checks in the customers at the entrance. Beyond the gate are several winding roads and a fresh site for the dumping activities of the day. All the trucks drive up, a bulldozer snorts, scrambles, whines and keens, mashing and crushing the discarded goods into the rich black earth. Beneath its blades, mixed into a permanent cocktail with the earth, are old bed springs, clippings from the gardener's trucks, papers, bottles, clothes, and furniture. After the bulldozer passes over, there is nothing left but churned up ground with a leavening of mashed paper and wood or green branches. Tomorrow another layer will cover this layer, then another will eventually still another. Archaeologists of the future will have to take the 20th century bulldozer into account. Once inside the gate, you join a procession of trucks with a few plain cars with trailers moving to the dumping spot of the day. You back in a few feet from where the bulldozer works and deposit your stuff. There are always some coming in and dumping in the shadow of the bulldozer, and as it eternally groans away, the dumping spot changes. I had filled the car with an accumulation of garbage, which I had been promising to do for months anyways, things that the weekly pickup services wouldn't touch. Higgins' basket looked innocent enough in the symphony of crud I carried. I was about to back into to a dumping spot when I took note of a car only one truck ahead of me. It looked disturbingly familiar. I hadn't seen Ben Jackson in a couple of years, but there was no doubt that the car was sporting one of Ben's distinctive paint jobs, and there was good old Ben himself, one of William Shaw's best friends, jockeying the vehicle into position to dump. I parked out of the line and went over to see him. He wasn't glad to see me, and when I surveyed his trailer full of dumpings, I could understand why. Higgins had been going the rounds that Saturday. I thought of it first, he cried. It is a large dump, I said. A very large dump. He was a fat, balding man with vague brown eyes. He waved at the 3 dump attendants who were busily engaged in picking over the materials left by the trucks. 1 could get by. 2, that would look suspicious, he said. I can't help it, I said. There are only so many places. That was when the accident happened. I don't know whether I slipped or whether Ben stumbled against me, but there was a truck hurrying in alongside of him. It caught me and knocked me flat on the ground. Things went whirly for a while. I heard voices, and the large, kind face of William Shaw came down out of the sky and smiled and thanked me for the kind. And the large, kind face of William Shaw came down out of the sky and smiled and thanked me for the kind assistance I was giving him. I tried to protest that I really couldn't help my bungling when I felt the strong fingers of the dump assistant pressing me into the seat behind the wheel of my car. Your friend helped you empty your stuff and left. You better go home now, said the attendant, wetting his lips nervously. His nervousness wasn't hard to understand. I might be badly hurt. I might even require ambulance attention later. I might sue the dump. On the whole, he thought it better if I left, so I did. The aspect of danger on my end was strong enough to get me out of there in a hurry. Safe on the road, I looked in the back seat to be sure all the stuff had vanished. The dump stuff was gone, and that pleased me, but resting on the back seat were 2 baskets instead of my original 1. Uh-oh. That's not good. So, there were 2 baskets instead of 1. Okay. I tried to think, but didn't get very far. I was still dazed and aching from the dump accident. Although I had suffered no permanent damage, I decided to go on home and look up Ben Jackson's address and go calling on him with a crowbar. My anger lasted all the way home until I drove up in front of the house and saw on my front porch a too familiar basket. The note attached to it was written in a flowery feminine hand. You'll remember, it said, Sarah King, a good friend of William Shaw's. I haven't seen you for a long time, Mr. Benson, but I know you can help me. I am practically a shut-in these days and live in an apartment. I know you are a gentleman and will be glad to help an old lady who doesn't get around much. Would you please take care of Mr. Shaw's rose bush for me? You live closest to me of all his friends, and you have a nice big yard. It was signed Sarah King. I hurried into the house. I was panicky. True, William Shaw had saved my life and helped start me on a useful career, but there were limits to gratitude. The phone rang with a monotonous petulance, which suggested it had been ringing for a long time. It was Charles Morisseau, Grace Shaw's brother. I recognized the defensive, belligerent voice before he'd spoken 3 words. Have you seen Grace Shaw? He asked. No, I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. though fear kept tightening my throat. I had not seen her. I had seen only some white packages, accurately wrapped and tied in 3 baskets, so at least I wasn't lying. My illustrious brother-in-law claims she's disappeared, said Morisseau, rather. I suspect foul play by some of his crude friends. I had a mental picture of Morisseau as I'd last seen him, the too cultured voice, the moist hands, the balding head, the fish pale blue eyes, the peered that peered suspiciously at all the human faces, or at all the human race rather. I remember Shaw's gracious good humor and fun. I began to get a little angry. Your sister has a very conspicuous reputation as a stay-at-home, I said. I think there's something odd going on, he said. I may be coming to see you and some of his so-called friends with the police. Any day, old man, any day, I said and hung up. That settled it. I wasn't going to be Morisseau's tool for destroying my good friend William Shaw. A week went by. I was ready for the expected visit of Morisseau and a heavy-footed policeman. I was completely ready, and even had an alibi for the particular Saturday afternoon. No one came. There was nothing in the papers. Once I drove by the Shaw place in Bel Air, one of the largest mansions. I saw only a uniformed Pinkerton man patrolling the grounds. I tried to call Higgins, but the phone was answered by a professional guard who said nobody was home. The tension lasted, but nothing disturbing happened. However, my wife complained about my peevishness, and one night I threw an old shoe at my son. Relief finally came. I received a note addressed by Higgins, which read, Mr. Shaw is taking a trip to Europe after a trying winter. He will see all his old friends when he returns in the fall. So that ended it. William Shaw was going to be all right, and I and the rest of us had nothing to worry about. ... Why do you swerve whenever you see a police car? Oh, good. My wife asked. Have you been cheating on your income tax again? Why, indeed, I wondered. To heck with waiting until fall. I wanted to be doubly sure that no policeman would come knocking at my door. I bought a bottle of champagne and forced my way into the Shaw mansion. Again, I met the imperturbable Higgins and told him about the call from Morisseau. Higgins smiled his quiet smile. We have nothing to fear, Mr. Benson. In fact, the trip to Europe was deliberately planned to put an end to Morisseau's staying here. Now that his sister has run off with another disreputable man, there were just the 4 of us, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw, Mr. Morisseau, and myself. Mrs. Shaw is gone. Now we can close the house, and he will have to leave. But there will be good times for all of us again in the fall. I pointed at some luggage lined in the hall. 2 large trunks and several women's suitcases. It looks as if I barely made it, I said. Maybe I better give this champagne to William and be on the way. Higgins shook his head. That wouldn't be wise, Mr. Benson. We have convinced Morisseau that his sister has run off. It wouldn't look right if he saw familiar faces of the old crowd, appearing so soon. I see your logic, I said, setting the bottle on the luggage. Give my regards to William. I stood at the dock in Los Angeles Harbor watching the departure of the big liner for Hawaii. It had been all too easy to discover the booking in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Higgins. I saw them briefly at the rail, but took great care to make sure they wouldn't see me. Charles Morisseau was there, grinning and waving up at his sister and his new brother-in-law, with William with William dead and buried by his 20 best friends, they had it made. Grace could support both Higgins and Charles in good style because none of them spent with the generosity that poor William had displayed all of his life. His Her necklace sparkled from her smooth throat. Higgins' teeth glistened in the sun as he hugged her and laughed a happy, unbutler-like laugh. I left and sent my telegram to the harbor police telling them anonymously that they'd find what they'd find in the 3 baskets in the Higgins stateroom, baskets that I'd kept on ice in a friendly butcher shop while racking my poor unimaginative brain in an unnecessary effort to get myself off the well-known book. Higgins had planned the murder well and executed the removal of the body neatly. A practical butler to the end. Higgins had made only one slip, a slip he couldn't help. There were 3 men and 1 woman living in that mansion. The woman was supposed to be dead, yet in the luggage he'd prepared for the trip to Europe, and wasn't it obvious that they'd take reservations in the opposite direction? Higgins had a set of women's luggage. Now, no proper butler of Higgins' ability would send two males, his master and himself, off to Europe with a lady's luggage. And that will do it for that. We will start up reading this next story, The Other Hangman by Carter Dixon. But we have read enough for today, I believe. Anyways, we've been reading Alfred Hitchcock Presents Stories Not for the Nervous. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, then all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.